Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Dr. C. Nagalakshmi, working as Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad. The paper currently under discussion is Methodology of Research in Sociology, and the name of the module is Components of a Research Report. In this module, I'll try to present a few formats of writing research reports, and this is in keeping in mind the needs of the sponsoring organization. Sometimes research reports are also written by corporates, and sometimes research reports are presented by authors themselves after conducting a lot of research. So there are different phases of writing these reports, different formats in which you can present the results of research, and there are also considerations of whether they can be given to general audience or specialist audience. So this module tries to address these issues and present some references also, if you can refer to the document that is presented along with this. Research as a process involves several phases and documents produced in a sequence. The sequence and phases of progress in research have a definite effect on the quality of the final report and on the research documents produced at all stages. Every research or study is judged for its adequacy, quality, and validity on the basis of 4 such documents, which are the research proposal, research summary, research abstract, and the research report. Research report is the main document on the basis of which the contribution of the research project is judged. A research report is a formal, official statement that contains facts, is a record of documentation of findings, and or is perhaps the result of a survey or an investigation, according to Booth in the year 1991. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a report is a statement of the results of an investigation or of any matter on which definite information is required. Report writing can be undertaken for purposes such as presentation of findings, to keep records of collected information or data, for documenting organizations' success and or failures, and also to write about the progress of a research project. Many of the parts or elements of report writing are generic, but there are themes specific to report writing that make it distinctive. Reports are drafted based on factual information with data and findings. The content is intended to be objective and not to be influenced by any personal bias or feelings of the authors. One can classify reports into several types based on the purpose of research, the funding or sponsoring organization, and the area of work. Reports can be documented only for information, sometimes very short and concise, for example, a budgeting report, and for other functions of different organizations. Case studies and analysis can be another type of report writing widely used at universities for project documentation. A report for an organization's internal audience can be in an informal format sometimes. This report can use informal conversational tone if it is addressing issues such as absenteeism, work plans, and processes. For a semi-formal report such as employee policy, a manual, or a task report, sometimes the language used can be informal but can have a formalized structure also. Third is a formal report with detailed structure and format, and for research analysis and of course with some inferences. Writing a report involves the following stages: clarifying terms of reference, planning the work, collecting data and information, organizing and structuring the collected information, writing the first draft, and final proof checking and redrafting of the report. Report writing thus is a diligent activity, as it involves collating and documenting all the facts collected through field investigation, compiled and documented following a predetermined research design. Reports require highly structured form of writing, and this could be a daunting task sometimes. There are some conventions that have been laid down to produce a common format to suit the different readership and audience. The structure and convention in written reports stress on the process by which the information is gathered to draft the report. A report can be distinguished from other forms of mainstream or traditional, usually used academic research, such as a discussion paper, working paper, or a journal article. For example, the main differences between a report and an essay or academic research narrative are that the essay format can be at the discretion of the author, but the report has a formal structure approved by the institution or funding agency to which the author belongs. Again, a report is used to communicate results or findings of project or research, while an essay is for developing an argument in depth, via a sequence of paragraphs. Moreover, a report includes some graphic presentations, some tables, data, figures, illustrations, but an essay is usually a prose. Finally, a report can make some recommendation for future actions, but it is unusual for an academic essay to make recommendations for action, although some conclusions are drawn. There is considerable amount of creativity involved in it and use of a great deal of imagery, inventive vocabulary and an elaborate style as well as academic rigor so that the readers are engaged and remain interested while reading it. Now we discuss the scope and reason for report writing. One can divide report writing into two stages, namely planning of the report and the actual writing process. A prospective author writing a report must be clear about the following before he or she begins writing. First, the reason and purpose, then the content of the report. Thirdly, the primary readership and the expectations from the report. And finally, the impact or benefit of the results. Who are the beneficiaries, its utility to the implementing authorities. The reason, purpose and scope of the report are sometimes predetermined by the organization sponsoring the research or by the author. Important dimensions of a report are thus the purpose of the report and the scope of the report. Scope of the report includes the clarity on what needs to go into the report and some guidelines on the format and the extent of analysis. The content of the report is also influenced by the concern for maintaining necessary academic rigor and standard, even though the author or the research team's writing capabilities very often determine such a standard. Readership and audience for the report is the next important consideration and is discussed in the following section. The nature of the intended audience, either external or internal, is an important factor in determining the length, the format, the structure, the language used, and the tone or pitch for a report. The authors aim towards dissemination of the report to some perceived audience or readers and the significance of the results documented in the report to be of value to them. Audience can thus broadly be classified as academic or specialized or wider and non-academic. The report is intended for a largely non-academic audience. The tone and language and style are to be prepared in a user-friendly and simple format. One key aspect of writing a report is the potential readership's level of familiarity or experience with the subject or theme of the report. If the report is for laypersons, the report needs to contain additional background information, a glossary of terms and theoretical explanation of the theme or subject. If the intended audience is specialized or narrow and comprises only the group or organization that has commissioned the report, it has to be written keeping in mind the specific aims and objectives set by the organization or the commissioning body. This sometimes might limit the scope of the report and flexibility for the authors, and it is important not to lose sight of the purpose and aims of the commissioning body while structuring the report as mentioned a while ago. Whether it is specific to audience or for a wider readership, the option of writing multiple versions of the report, each catering to specific audience, with and without special additional information, tone, font, writing style and explanation of terms and themes is also preferable. The presentation and content of a report can thus be structured to indicate the main points of decision, presentation of facts and information, and shaping future action to be easily understood and usable for the audience or readers. To sum up, a report can be written to suit an audience. A popular report must be able to add some increments to their knowledge, help the audience find the right information within the report, know and cater to at least some of the preferences of the intended audience, and cater to their usability by designing the report format appropriately. There are some common errors that a writer should be aware of and avoid, and they are excessive jargon, verbosity, personal bias, factual inaccuracies, grammatical errors, absence of reasoning, sequence and reference. So in order to avoid these errors, one has to follow a certain stage in planning and writing process. There are several stages in this and they will be explained now. The planning and writing process and phases for a report can be divided into 3 stages each. The planning phase can be divided into 3 stages, which are clarifying the brief, doing the research and organizing the content. The writing stage can be divided into analysis stage, drafting and the proofreading stage. The tasks in each of these phases and stages are explained in the following sections. The first is the planning stage, and for a report, it involves the clarification of the objective of the report first. The specific instructions, guidelines issued by the sponsors or organizers for writing the report are to be fully understood and internalized by the team and authors. It is important to recollect in this case that if there was a meeting or a launch of the project for a formal project with a launching event, and whatever was announced as the project objectives and the format of the report has to follow the same. The planning stage is followed by the actual data collection and research stage. This is the backbone of the report, as the quality of any report depends essentially on the quality of data collected and analyzed. A study that fails to collect enough and reliable data from various sources would obviously fail to generate useful conclusions. The next stage is the organization of the content. Authors need to review the notes made and group all of them under various headings and subheadings. At this stage, the authors should retain only the relevant content for the objectives, and the brief provided must discard all the irrelevant content. The order of the content should be logical, and authors should make sure the ideas are paraphrased into words and should avoid any plagiarizing practices. The next is the writing phase, and this also entails 3 stages as mentioned before, including analysis, drafting and proofreading. Analysis and writing starts with a simple description of the data gathered and then is critically examined for the evidence for substantiating the research findings. It is important to note the limitations of the research project at this stage. Drafting the research report requires a simple style without superfluous words and unnecessary details. In the content, technical terms are to be used appropriately and make reference to tables with the data, graphs and illustrations. Proofreading stage is the final and most important one, as it requires diligence and accuracy. The first point is to check the flow of the report and whether the brief provided initially is being followed. The language, syntax, spellings, all of which are usually enabled by word processing software as computers are used, can be of use for authors. The numbers assigned to illustrations, tables and paragraphs are to be checked along with the references cited. The layout, the contents page, the page numbers and captions are also to be checked thoroughly. Writing needs to follow a structure and can be divided into several components. These are described in the following section. The structure and components of the reports. The report structure ensures ease of navigation across the document for the readers and organizing all the data that is collected. Usually the components of a report include 3 parts: the introductory section, the main and the explanatory middle section, and the end with appendices and references. The beginning and the introduction. This is the first section and is obviously an introduction which provides a background for the research study being presented, and it contains a title page, a copyright, contents list or table of contents, list of illustrations, a list of tables, a foreword, a preface, acknowledgements, list of abbreviations and acronyms, sometimes some glossary of terms, a summary or abstract, and sometimes an executive summary. The arrangement of the subsections and the sequence depends on the length and scope of research conducted. Lengthy reports require more structuring and sequence, obviously. To begin with, the title page should include a full title of the report, the names and affiliation of the authors, the sponsors or to whom the report is to be submitted, the name and address of the publisher and the date of publication. Other details that can be included in the later pages are an ISBN number, if any, and a copyright in the inside page. You may refer to the figure that is provided in the report for a sample of the contents of the copyright, permissions and the ISBN details. The contents list is of a lot of significance and it helps the reader to identify the main sections of the report. Hence, its preparation requires meticulous planning. Each research report shall have a table of contents tailored appropriately as per the theme of the research and the topic dealt with. In the above example, which is provided in the illustration, the contents are arranged to explain the gender gap, its measurement, and the country profiles. Since the cited report caters to the needs of global readership, it also includes a user's guide and the associated explanation. One can also present contents in a simple format, and you may follow the second figure with an example of table of contents in the document. As against the format stated in this figure, page numbers of a content list can be put on the right side. It is a standard practice to state the full page numbers of each section and only mention the first page number of a chapter. You may follow the convention that is acceptable to your organization. A contents list should also mention the following before beginning the introductory section: list of illustrations, tables, figures, page number of the foreword, preface, acknowledgements, etc. And of course the summary or an executive summary if it is included. It is, however, not mandatory for any report writer to mention all of them, as one may not, for instance, write a foreword or summary for a report. List of illustrations at the outset are numbered or linked to the particular chapter to help the reader. Other subsections are listed with the related aspects in the following sequence: a foreword or a preface. This can be used to draw a potential reader into the major theme of the report. This can be written by the research team or author, including interesting details of the report or the rationale behind the report in the preface. Many a time, subject experts known for proficiency and in-depth knowledge on the central theme of the report, or a person with sufficient degree of authority in the discipline, write these prefaces and forewords. In the acknowledgements section, the authors can express gratitude to all the individuals and organizations who are important and contributed to the research and writing, publication and production of the report in its full form. Obviously, it is a well-documented practice to acknowledge the contributions of respondents, academicians and intellectuals, the funding agency, the research team members, support staff, library staff and others. All the abbreviations that are mentioned in the report should be identified and explained in a section prior to the main section, primarily to help the reader. It is for the authors to include the section or not if there are no abbreviations. If the report is for general audience, it includes technical terms. There is a need to include a glossary of terms at the end of the document. Summary or an abstract or an executive summary is also an important part of the report, and this should ideally provide the reader with details, aims, objectives of the report, a brief methodological overview, key findings and subsequent conclusions, and set of recommendations that emanate from these. It is important to note that all readers may not read the report from cover to cover. They may browse the text, focus only on sections which are relevant to their interests and needs. Hence, the summary is the most important section of the report, summarizing the overall content and the findings. Now coming to the main content. The report's main content may be organized under the following subsections: an introduction, a background or an overview. This section should set the context, engage the reader to understand the background of the report. This can include some details on who commissioned the report, when and for what reasons. Some important terms of reference, resources which were available for the author to prepare the report can be mentioned, and sources of information and data and how they were obtained in the brief section. The structure of the report and the subsections are organized as per the research plan. Introductory part of the report is significant for several reasons, because it introduces the reader to the basic theme, the context and the agenda of the research. It builds a platform for development of detail of the explanation of concepts, variables and subject matter in the rest of the report. By doing so, it also helps the authors to critically examine his or her arguments so as to develop new theoretical insights on the subject matter and the conclusion. Finally, it would aim to attract the attention of the reader, specialist or general, for detailed and elaborate study of the complete report. Now the central or the middle part of the main content of the report. As mentioned in the previous section, it begins with an introduction and should set the background for the reader. It should include sufficient explanation and background details so that the main part of the report shall be fully consumed. The introduction can include details of the origin of the report, who commissioned it and the time frame, when and why the report was commissioned, the terms of reference, the resources, etc. The authors usually structure report into parts to analytically present the theoretical orientation, if any, and the several modules available for analysis. After the introduction, there is a clear or predetermined structure and is made clearer by the hierarchy of headings and subheadings with specific numbers. This can also be drawn from different styles available, for example, in Microsoft Word. The structure sometimes is dependent on the funding organization specifications and or directives, and this also can convey the required message within this hierarchy of headings. The stylistic tools are convenient for the readers to identify and access information within the content. This also allows for cross-reference and easy navigation. After presenting the existing modules and a review of literature available that is relevant to the report presents its data, the findings as per the funding organization's requirement. Notwithstanding differences of approach, it is customary to begin with the general aspects of the findings like socio-economic background of the respondents and end with some critical observations and analysis. In between, the effort gets concentrated to explain the reasons and factors responsible for a particular issue being researched. While doing so, the authors should try to explain a phenomenon from both quantitative and qualitative points of view. For instance, a table or graph containing vital information may be supplemented by case history or narratives from the field. Such triangulation allows authors to delve deep into the issue being researched and come out with logical, valid and reasonable explanations. If an analysis is bereft of, say, qualitative aspects of social life and relies more on quantitative data, the analysis may remain partial and incomplete. In sociology in particular, attempts are made to come out with holistic explanation of events and social phenomena under analysis, and the process of social life in general are very complex, heterogeneous and fluid. This allows sociologists to reveal limitations of purely statistical or economic analysis. You may refer to some of the reports that are provided in the URLs in the document to know how reputed international agencies offer their reports. For example, the Human Development Report, the World Development Report, and the Global Gender Gap Report, which is mentioned in the previous section. One can also look at the reports written for funded projects, and they usually have a detailed structure and presentation. For example, in the illustration you may find there is a structure of a research report on the work and culture of the information technology industry in India. This is an academic research report and its structure and table of contents. It includes an executive summary, a preface, introduction, the political economy of the IT industry in India, work and employment in software outsourcing industry, etc. And to mention the source, it is Professor Carol Upadhyaya and Dr. A.R. Vasavi, who worked on work culture and sociality in the Indian information technology industry. It is a sociological study and a project report available on the website of the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. This is another important type of research report that are written for projects undertaken by the corporate bodies. There is a detailed structure and presentation in this type of reports also. For example, in a corporate report, with the example provided in this document made by Deloitte Touche and Tomatsu India, it talks about the resetting horizons and the global human capital trends in the year 2013. It is available on the website as a PDF. The report content contains 10 findings of the human capital trends at a global level, and that is suited to the human resource community or in organizations. At the end of the document, it is mentioned that way. So these are the formats that are suitable for executive level readership in companies as well as some general readership. You may refer to the page that is presented in the document. So reports based on such research and are conducted by corporate houses and companies are creative. They include an executive summary and some recommendations, but they are less emphatic on the theory. One can note that there is a link at the bottom of the page that asks the reader to explore the human capital trends dashboard on the internet. The conclusions, summary and recommendations form the last section of such reports, and one can observe in all such types of reports. This section usually is tailored to the funding organization's requirement as mentioned before. Yet, readers expect all conclusions to summarize the basic findings of the study and evolve generalizations, sometimes to reject a theory, to modify a theory and build a new theory in sociological study reports. Hence, it is a normal practice to briefly state the aims and objectives of the research as well as methodology followed to conduct the study in concluding section before stating the major findings and analyzing those critically. This is also because the busy reader may only be interested in reading the conclusion. Now coming to the last section, the end of the report, third part. The main section, the last sections are usually supplementing the last section, and these include appendices, references and suggestions for further readings. Appendices can be included at the end of the document, and they are usually in different forms. They should be included if they add value and help the reader understand the main text better. And all the details that go beyond the main content of the report are usually in the appendix. The appendices also are for the specialist or professional audience who seek details such as methodological frameworks, questionnaires, statistical or technical information, originals of any letters and related documentation referred to in the content of the report. The authors must exercise discretion in deciding whether the material presented is better appended or in the main text. If the authors are of the opinion that the content is to be definitely read, then it must be placed in the main text. If it is not essential, it can be appended, discussed briefly in the main text. References of books, articles, journals, and other relevant documents have to be provided following a format or style as required. The last and final section is the index, and this allows readers to look at keywords and allows them to get to the depth of the theme or topics otherwise hidden in the main content. This is a daunting task if done manually. However, word processing software is available that enables authors to compile index with just a few commands, including cross-referencing. The last and final step for a research project is its publishing, production, and dissemination. Research reports produced for specific readership by funding organizations have a few constraints in terms of the formats in which the report has to be published and also whether it can be used for articles submitted to journals. If the report is for generalized audience, it has to be disseminated on a large scale, and there is a need to design an appropriate cover page printed by the commercial publisher. Even if it is an expensive consideration, sometimes it works well. This can be an in-house activity or it can be outsourced to a publisher. In case of outsourcing, there is a need to strictly monitor the process of production diligently with revisions or versions to ensure good quality. Apart from printing, the research reports can also be published on the internet, but with copyrights and careful consideration whether it is allowed by the sponsor. Many times, websites of the sponsors present carefully compiled summary and findings only and seek details of the reader in case he or she wants complete access to the report. So to conclude this module, the components of a research report are tuned to the needs of the audience. In fact, there is also this concern about who is sponsoring the research, and so the sponsor's interests should be safeguarded. Sometimes the sponsors may also not like the dissemination of the report and it may remain with the specialist audience. In such cases, there are different formats that have to be followed. And if it is a generalist audience to whom the research report is being addressed, there is a need to keep a set of terms of report, a glossary of terms, and this should be more of interest to generalist audience. So the reason, the purpose, and the scope of the research report should be tuned in accordance with the needs of the audience. So that is how one can actually successfully design the components of research report and present them appropriately. So dissemination, publishing, and all of these phases actually come after the planning, writing, and presenting the research report to the sponsoring organization.